Every meal that Timberlake offers tonight is an invitation to a relationship. Not just a relationship with the mission, but a relationship with the local church. The mission is convinced that God sent the local church to reach the world for Christ, including our homeless neighbors. And so having Timberlake volunteers with us on the streets is an opportunity for us to help our homeless neighbors see the local church as a place that God wants to give them relationship and opportunity to connect in a way that God designed from the very beginning.
Thank you guys so much for making this. It's really appreciated.
Well, good morning again. Oh man, you're gonna have to help me. Good morning again. Yeah, there you go. If you're joining us online, we are glad to have you with us. Here's the deal. Today we are kicking off a brand new series simply called Ready or Not. And it is a teaching series about change. Because whether we're ready for it or not, change is coming. In the past 50 years, this planet has exploded in growth. We've gone from almost 4 billion people to almost 8 billion people. And as you know, that kind of change is going to result in infrastructure changes, housing changes, transportation change, all kinds of changes. Right on the east side, in the past 50 years, we've gone from basically a big farming community to the center of technology. And technology is responsible for most of what's happening in this world, right? Whether it is self-driving cars or blockchain or 3D printing or quantum computing or artificial intelligence, it's responsible for so much of what is taking place on this planet. Here's a Radio Shack ad from 1991. There are 15 different products on this advertisement, 13 of which are on our cell phone right now. Think about that, 13 of those products: video camera, calculator, radio, computer, CD player, answering machine. The only 2 products not on our phone from this ad is a radar detector and a 3-way speaker with a woofer. There you go, everything else. So we live in a world of change. Economy's always changing, laws and policies are always changing, where we work from changes. Used to always be the office, and now many people are working from home, or there's a hybrid of home and office. Our physical health, how we feel, that's always evolving and changing. Most people who are in a family understand that family dynamics are regularly changing and evolving. For those who follow sports, how a team performs changes. Right? Think about this for Huskies fans. Right? Most wins ever in a season. Team's 135 years old. Still setting records. Our world is constantly changing. 3,000 years ago, King Solomon of Israel is nearing the end of his life. He's looking back at some of the lessons he's learned. He's writing a book about his observations, and here's what he writes. He says, "For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven." Solomon says there is a time and a season for everything, and then he goes on to give examples. He talks about a time to be born and a time to die, a time to speak and a time to listen, a time to dance and a time to mourn, a time to keep things and a time to throw things away. Life is filled with seasons. That is the way that God intended for things to be. In fact, in some of the earliest recorded parts of human history, we learn that God spoke these words to humanity, that as long as the earth remains, there will be planting and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. Regardless of your age, your color, your demographic, your background, your interests, your income, your life has been impacted dramatically by change, and it will continue to be impacted by change. It's the way change works. Generally speaking, there are 3 categories of change. The first is evolutionary change, right? This is a gradual process of changing into something different. This is when we are moving from what was to what eventually will be. And all of our lives are marked by evolutionary change, which seems pretty appropriate because this is how life begins. For the first 9 months of our existence, we are inside the womb of our mother. And here's the deal. It is a luxury spa with a private swimming pool, 98.6 degree Fahrenheit. It's amazing. And it's an all-you-can-eat buffet, right? We're just attached to mama and we are feeding whenever we want. If it was up to us, we would stay like that forever. But it's not up to us. We're pushed out. And eventually, we come into this world and the umbilical cord is cut. I should say for most people, it's cut, because I have met people still attached to mama, all right? But we leave the womb and we're a newborn baby that needs to be fed and dressed and taken care of. And we continue to evolve and mature and grow. And every parent knows that is an agonizingly slow process for children. All right, with my daughter, Caitlin, who went through a big season of rebellion, she was 16 years old. We threw her a super sweet 16 surprise party. It's a big deal. And she was loving it. But in the middle of the party, I kid you not, she came up to myself and my wife and said, "Can you please leave?" We said, "Why? What did we do?" "Just leave. It's embarrassing to have you here. We're paying for your party. We're the ones throwing it. You didn't even know about this party. No, please leave." And we wouldn't leave. I mean, it was just like, no, we're gonna keep an eye on what's going on. But fast forward 8 or 9 years, last year, she had a party at our house. She asked us to have the party, and she pretty much begged my wife and I to participate, to hang out with them, to play games with them, to do with them. And I told her no. I said, "You're embarrassing. I'm not gonna hang out with you." Evolutionary change. Right, if you've been married for 20 or 30 years, you know that the person you're married to today is not the same person you exchanged vows with many years ago. I tell every couple who is exchanging vows, I tell them this at the ceremony. I say, just so you know, the person you're committing to marry today is not gonna be the same person in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, because life has a way of changing us. So if you look at your spouse sometimes and say, "I swear, I did not marry this person." You didn't. They're just always evolving, right? Evolutionary change is what happens when we become followers of Jesus, right? We surrender to Jesus and we receive a new identity. We become sons and daughters of God. The Apostle Paul, he explains it this way. He says, this means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone, a new life has begun. If you, at any point, decided to surrender your life to Jesus and follow him, instantly you were made new. But life didn't change overnight. And this is one of the most frustrating things when we experience it for ourselves, but often when we see it in other people, we're like, "I thought that they became a follower of Jesus. Look at the way they're living." Let me tell you something, it is a process. It takes a lot of time and a lot of intentionality to align our hearts and our minds and our will and our attitude to the heart and the nature and the character of God. Lifelong process. And the thing about evolutionary change is because it's slow and because it happens over time, we have a say in the matter. Like, we have some control during the evolutionary process because it's unfolding over an extended period of time. But there's another category of change, and that's crisis change. This is a type of change we have very little control over. It's a sudden event that forces change on us. This can be the loss of a loved one, divorce, unemployment, can be war, or a drastic shift in the economy. It can be a natural disaster. We watched on the news, right? 7.6 magnitude earthquake in Japan this past week. Houses destroyed, buildings collapsed, fires breaking out, some people trapped, others died. Tens of thousands of people were forced to find shelter. It was a crisis. It unfolded very, very quickly, and as a result, people right now are experiencing dramatic changes in their life. And it's possible that today you find yourself in a crisis. Crisis in your marriage, crisis with one of your kids, maybe a crisis in your career, crisis with your health. Maybe it's an addiction that you're fighting. And I want you to know that God is aware of that crisis. In the words of King David from 3,000 years ago, as he makes an observation about God, are as true today as they were back then. That the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. So whatever crisis you're experiencing right now, God is with you and God is for you. And I don't want you to miss that. He's with you right now. He sees you. And it's hard to believe that, right? It's hard to feel that. It's like, it feels like God's a million miles away when we're in a crisis. But I promise you, he's not. There's a third category of change, and that's visionary change. And this is the kind of change that we initiate. At this time of year, it's very common to set goals and resolutions, right? And that's because we want to be a better version of ourselves. And so we say things like, well, this year I'm going to lose weight. This year I'm going to save more money. I'm gonna have more margin in my finances, right? This year, I'm gonna spend less time on social media, whatever it is, we wanna become a better version of ourselves. And so regardless of what kind of change we're talking about, there are different categories of change, obviously, but we have to learn to navigate the change in whichever category it falls into. And the reason why is because if we do not learn to navigate change in healthy ways, what often happens is we'll end up gravitating towards unhealthy ways of navigating it. We end up going through some sort of coping mechanism that will make things worse and not better. And the reason why is because change tends to often cause challenges and difficulty. It's just a new way of doing things. And so we're stressed or overwhelmed or we don't really know how to navigate. And so we end up isolating ourselves from others, maybe avoiding tough conversations that need to be had in the midst of that change. Or we try to check out, we overwork, we drink too much, we spend too much time in front of a screen. Maybe in the midst of the change, we're getting real emotional and we're not doing good at managing our emotions. In fact, some of the biggest stories of people shipwrecking their lives, like you look at them and it seems to have a picture perfect life and then they shipwreck their life and you're like, how did it happen? Well, it happened during a season of change and a season of transition. They did not navigate it well. And since change is part of life and none of us want to shipwreck our life, we need to understand some of the realities associated with change. And one of the realities is that change always involves some sort of trade-off. As a teenager, there was a game that I would play with my friends. We only played it maybe 3 or 4 times, but it was called Bigger or Better. It's when you just take a small little object, and often it involved, and for us it did, going to a stranger's house and saying, hey, here's what we have. Would you exchange it with us because we're doing this bigger and better? Give us something bigger and better. I think one time we ended up getting a refrigerator. It didn't work, but it was bigger, and so it's the way it worked. And during the pandemic, this game that's been around for a while, it became really popular again. And there was this woman named Demi who, on her TikTok channel, decided to play the game. And she started with a bobby pin. And she just said, all right, who will trade me something bigger and better? And so trades started being made. And eventually she acquires a snowboard, an Apple TV, then an Xbox. She got a Peloton bike. And then she got this vintage tractor. She ended up getting 3 tractors for all of these trades, diamond necklace, multiple cars. And I kid you not, after 28 trades, she got a house. That is an inspirational story. And I love that story because when I moved to the east side 3 months ago, I wondered how I could ever afford a house. So I want you to know, I brought with me a bobby pin today. And I'm ready. I'm ready to start making the moves, ladies and gentlemen. Every type of change requires us at some level to make a trade. We have to give up something in order to experience something else. So when I graduated high school, I gave up the freedom to just go back to high school or middle school and sit through classes anytime I wanted. Why? Because I had to exchange high school for college. For those of you thinking about getting married, I want you to know it's a trade-off. When I made the decision to get married, I gave up the freedom to date other people. I gave up some of my independence. I decided I'm not just gonna go wherever I want or do whatever I want whenever I want to. In exchange, I received a secure, long-term relationship filled with love and companionship. For those of you thinking about having kids, it's a trade-off. And I can tell you from experience, you're gonna give up sleep and comfort and freedom and convenience and spontaneity and privacy and hobbies and flexibility and a clean house. And I'm kind of forgetting the upside. Oh yes, in exchange, you get a tax benefit. So there are reasons for having them, right? But change involves giving up one thing for another. When we surrender our lives to Jesus, we are making a trade-off. See, it's easy to say, well, I want to follow Jesus and make no trade. But that's not how it works. In fact, Jesus explained following him to his disciples. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. Taking up our cross is a reference to dying to self. And Jesus is saying, if you're gonna follow me, you must give up your way for my way. The ways of Jesus always require a trade-off. You study the teachings of Jesus. One of the more common teachings of Jesus that he talked about on a regular basis was forgiving people who hurt us. What's a trade-off? It's a trade-off of my pride. It's a trade-off of my right to get even. But in exchange, we often find the freedom that comes with forgiving others. Throughout his teachings, Jesus called us to be generous. But generosity, if we're gonna grow in it, requires a trade-off. We have to give up and trade off some of the false sense of security that money brings us. Jesus often called us to serve others. Right? Do for others what you want them to do for you. But that requires us at some level to give up flexibility and time. It involves some sort of trade-off. There's another reality about change that we experience during the midst of it, and that is change is filled with challenges. Even if we're the ones who initiated the change, it's visionary change, it's gonna require us to bump up against challenges. There's always gonna be difficulty or pain or inconvenience in some way, and this is why it's so common for us to resist change, right? I wanna become financially free, but I don't wanna change my lifestyle. I want to become healthier, I wanna have more energy, I just don't wanna eat differently, right? I want to, my marriage to improve, I just don't wanna do anything different. I want to sincerely follow Jesus, but I still wanna do whatever I wanna do. The reality is, all of us, come on, this is true, all of us want the benefits of change without the burden. We want the results that change brings without the inconvenience. But change always involves challenges. It always involves difficulty. One of the most difficult things about change is there's lots and lots of unknown. And this is why in seasons of big change, it's very common to become emotional. There's just so much unknown. We don't know how it's gonna end. We don't know how the story's gonna evolve and how the story, the twists and turns are in front of us. And so we become afraid or angry or depressed or insecure, confused or sad. Change is filled with all types of challenges. And this is true in following Jesus, right? Following Jesus is all about change of attitude, change of thinking, change of behavior. And change is not easy. The Apostle Paul acknowledges this in one of his letters. I mean, here, the Apostle Paul, so many people admire him because of his faith. And he says to his first century readers, I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. If there is a scripture that I follow, right? I mean, it just feels like we can all relate to the Apostle Paul. When we become followers of Jesus, God goes to work in our life and he uses people and events and circumstances and all sorts of things to chisel away at our hearts and our attitudes to make us more and more like Jesus. But it is a slow change. It is a slow change. It's a lifelong change. And it is filled with all types of challenges. That's the bad news. The good news is this, that change always creates an opportunity for growth. This is so important for us to recognize. Right? Whenever we're experiencing change, whether it's change forced on us or change that we initiated, there's an opportunity for us to grow. This is why Paul tells first century followers of Jesus, he says, we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials. Why? For we know that they help us develop endurance, and endurance develops strength of character. Change always creates an opportunity for growth. This is so important because typically, when we're experiencing the difficulty that comes with change, we run from it. We try to stay as comfortable as possible. And that makes sense. I mean, we're rational human beings. We don't want to go through difficult times. But here's what I want you to know, that when you're going through something painful, even though God doesn't cause your pain, God uses pain. And our pain can be an opportunity for God to do something in us and eventually through us. And this is why how we respond to pain and how we respond to change matters. Because it's an opportunity for growth. It might be growth in our thinking, growth in our character, growth in a skill set. It might be growth in our friendships. Often I find that change is an opportunity for us to grow in our faith, to grow in our dependence on God. I mean, here's the reality. When life is comfortable and predictable, come on. Our prayer life doesn't look the same as when we're going through challenges. How we approach the scriptures just doesn't look the same as when we're going through difficulty. Right? We're going through difficulty, we tend to be more engaged with our faith community. We need people around us, we understand that. And it's not because of, our generation or how we're made up in this time period of history, like, oh, well, we're not truly people of faith because we don't seek God the same way as when we're going through difficulty. King David at 3,000 years ago, he goes through change, he's experiencing stress and turbulence in his life, and here's the words he prays, from the ends of the earth, I cry to you for help when my heart is overwhelmed. Do you know what I do when I'm overwhelmed? Same thing David did. Cry to God for help. And it's usually rescue me. It's usually deliver me from what I'm going through. But the truth is, God can use that in my life. When my life is steady and predictable and comfortable, I'm just being candid with you. I don't feel the need to pray the same. I don't approach scriptures the same. Change creates an opportunity for growth. And I was thinking back this week to the different seasons of my life where I'm confident I grew. And I would say, hands down, the time in my life that I absolutely grew the most is when I started having kids. It was the first time in my life I felt almost forced to focus on someone other than myself, right? When I was a newlywed, that was changing me, but I didn't feel the force. I was like, she's independent, I'm independent. But when you have someone dependent on you, it's a big deal. And I grew. So the changes you're going through because of your recent divorce, the changes you're experiencing because of the layoff, because of your loved one's addiction, because of the health diagnosis, because of the loss that you are going through. Obviously, you don't want this. I don't want these things in our life. We don't like these challenges. But I want you to know that they're not all wasted. They can become opportunities for growth, but God does not force us to grow. So you're going through a difficulty right now, something you don't want, understandable. It can be an opportunity for growth if you position your heart and you position your mind and your attitude in a way that allows you to mature and learn and develop. One more reality about change is that change is a doorway into something new. Every day we're walking through doors, right? Bedroom doors, bathroom doors, the door to our house, office doors, garage doors, car doors. And what doors do is they help us transition from one place into another, and that is what change does. It is a doorway into something new. And so just a few days ago, we all experienced the change that happens when a calendar year comes to an end, right? We walked through the door into a new year. And every time a new year arrives, it's an opportunity for a new start. And I would argue that every day is an opportunity for a new start. One of the most difficult seasons that the Jewish people went through, the prophet Jeremiah reminds them in that season that the faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Jeremiah says, great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. So here's what I want you to know today. This year is inevitably, just like every other year, gonna be filled with all types of changes. And regardless of the changes you experience, whether you initiate them or they're forced on you, regardless of those changes, this has the potential to be your best year yet. It has the potential to be one of the best years of your life. And I'm not just saying that to hype you up, and I'm not just saying that because it seems like the pastoral thing to say. The reason I say that is because every additional year that we're on this planet, we have more and more experiences to pull from, good and bad. And our past experiences have the potential to prepare us for future challenges. Our past experiences can prepare us for future challenges. It should make sense to us all, right? We learn lessons and we now know how to approach the future. This is true in big things, but it's also true in trivial things. So one of the things that I've learned after living in the greater Seattle area for the last 3 months is that there is roughly 18 hours a day where the 405 is a parking lot. Right, so when my daughter Caitlin was in town for Christmas, she wondered why I bought her a ticket flying out first thing in the morning. Right, so the day she flew out, it was early, we were on the road at 4:30 in the morning. I said, because I want to avoid traffic. I've also learned that the 520 bridge is unpredictable when it's open or closed. It seems to be more closed than it is open. And so I learned from that, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to think more and give myself more time when traveling. Here's another story, it's just trivial. When I was in my early 20s, I had a car that was beaten up, it was rusty, and there was a rust mark on a door that was growing. Now here's the whole thing is, the car was rusty and bad, but this rust spot was growing, it was bothering me, so I studied up on how to fix it, how to change it. I decided to become my own body shop. Got painted it, and here's the deal, when it was said and done, it was a square that had a different shade of blue than the rest of the car. Now you understand, I probably should never have painted this thing in the first place. But I have never, ever tried to paint my own car again. Just haven't done it. Why? Here's what I don't want you to miss. As humans, we are really, really good at learning from our mistakes in the areas that don't really matter. In the big picture of life, it doesn't matter how much time I spend on the 405. In the big picture of life, it doesn't matter whether every single one of my vehicles has a square patch painted a different shade of color than the rest of the car. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I use the wrong ingredients when making a meal. In the big picture of life, it just doesn't matter. But I'm not going to make those mistakes again. Why? Because we're really, really good at learning from our mistakes in the areas that don't really matter. But at the same time, we're really bad at learning from our mistakes in the areas that matter most. You think about this. When it comes to our money, when it comes to our marriage, when it comes to our friendships, when it comes to sex, when it comes to conflicts with other people and how we deal with it, when it comes to the way we speak our words and the way we use our words, when it comes to things that are related in our character or in our career or in our parenting, as humans, we tend to be really, really bad at learning from our mistakes in the areas that matter most. And so we keep repeating them. 3,000 years ago, King Solomon of Israel writes about this pattern of behavior, and here's what he says. He says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his foolishness. And I don't need a bunch of examples because all we need to do is look at our own lives. We all have stories of times in our life we made horrible decisions and it landed us in a place we did not want to be. But fast forward 2 years, we made the same decision again. Fast forward to 3 more years, we made the same decision again. We just keep going back. And I bring this up because it's a new year. And this year, like every other year, is going to be filled with changes, and those changes are going to present challenges, but they're also going to present the opportunity to walk through the doorway into something new. We do not have to keep repeating the same mistakes. So if you want to do things differently this year, it's going to start by identifying and acknowledging some of the mistakes you made from the past year, or maybe the year before. If you won't acknowledge your mistakes, you're never going to get ahead. You have to at least identify them and acknowledge them and say, I have to learn from that. King Solomon explains it this way. He says, people who conceal their sins will not prosper, but if they confess, if they turn from them, they will receive mercy. So how do you want your life to look different in 2024? I mean, if you want to lose weight, that's great. Save money, great, you should. You want to spend less time on social media? I think that's really, really important. But let me ask you, do you have any sort of goal? Do you have any sort of revolution or resolution for change in an area of your life that really matters? Do you have a resolution in maybe your priorities and how you're gonna prioritize differently this year? Or with your money, maybe it's this year, I'm gonna take a step towards generosity. Or maybe I've been very undisciplined in how I manage my emotions. This year, I want to grow. I want to mature in how I handle my emotions. Or maybe you this year are going to enlarge your circle of friends because it's become a very small group. Or maybe it's getting a whole new circle of friends because you look at the friends that you've developed and they become an anchor to where you want to go. Or maybe, if you're just honest, every setting you're in, you seem to take from people rather than add to them. And so this year, you're like, it's gonna be a year where I just intentionally add value to others rather than taking. What if this year was one of the best years of your life because you found a way to learn from your mistakes in the areas that mattered the most? So as I look back to 2023, one of the biggest mistakes that I made was allowing myself to just become too comfortable. Now, just being candid, 2023 was not an easy year for me. It was difficult in many, many ways, lots of challenges. But I had lived in the same community and pastored the same church for 15 years. I had developed a very tight group of friends. I knew who I could trust and who I couldn't trust. I had worked for 15 years to develop a large network of pastors, and every year we go on a trip together and we learn from each other and we pray for each other. I loved all of it. Absolutely loved all that. None of that was bad. But internally, I'd become crazy comfortable. And I just felt like something was dying slowly on the inside. I just didn't have the same kind of vision or energy or passion or excitement. There was something going on. And I anticipated being in Wisconsin for the next 15 years. And then just through a crazy set of circumstances, and I've alluded to this in the past, I don't have time to get into details, it was almost a supernatural type of experience. I felt overwhelmed with the sense that I was supposed to be here at Timberlake Church. And the board had extended an invitation, and I felt like, okay, this is it. So my family and I, we picked up our very comfortable lives and we moved from Wisconsin to the east side, and we started over and making friends, started over connecting with other pastors, meeting neighbors, started over and pastoring a church filled with filthy and obnoxious sinners. And in 2023, I started my life over in many, many ways. And I'm sure you understand this, that for several months, I just have been on this roller coaster of emotions. If you were around for Pastor Ben in the 15 years he was here, he's an off-the-charts leader. So I was scared. I certainly did not feel qualified to lead this church, but I felt like God had just made it clear to me, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I also felt God regularly reminding me, bringing to my mind, my heart, the same words that he spoke over Joshua when he replaced Moses as the leader of the Jewish people. He said, this is my command, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And almost every single day during this transition, those words just pop up in my mind. Be strong and courageous. God's with you wherever you go. Whatever changes that you encounter this year, whatever challenges you're confronted with because of those changes, I want you to hear those same words. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And I'm self-aware. I know I'm not gonna get everything right as a leader. I know I'm not gonna achieve all of my goals. Right, is my character gonna always reflect Jesus 100% of the time? Am I always gonna love like Jesus, serve like Jesus? Of course not. I'm obviously gonna do the best I can, but I'm not gonna get everything right. And this is where I have to be aware that God is constantly extending his love and his grace and his mercy to me in the areas that I fail. And so as we navigate the changes of life and the challenges that they bring, we absolutely need to do our best to seek God's wisdom and learn from our mistakes of the past year. But we're still not gonna get everything right. We're not gonna do everything we're supposed to do. We're gonna drop the ball. There's gonna be times we do not have the strength to keep on going. But I want you to know, God's grace is sufficient. The Apostle Paul talks about on 3 different occasions praying about something that had just become this burden in his life. And he said, God, deliver me, set me free. And he said, I felt like God spoke to me. My grace is sufficient. I tell you today, his grace is sufficient. So you have a mountain in front of you. God's able to move mountains that seem immovable. You feel just completely confined by chains. I want you to know God is able to break chains that seem unbreakable. You're up against something impossible. God is able to do the impossible. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged. The Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Let me pray over you. Our Heavenly Father, we are very aware as we enter this year that it's gonna be a year of change, like every other year. God, regardless of what type of change that we're confronted with, I pray that you would give us the wisdom to know in that season how to best navigate the change that we're experiencing. Give us the wisdom to know how we can best grow and learn and mature in the midst of the change. And then I pray, give us the courage to take the steps forward and do what we know we're supposed to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for watching. But before you go, please be sure to bookmark this page so you can find us again next week. And are you looking for a way to get engaged and join a team? The online chat engagement team is a role that anyone and everyone can do, and it's simple. Engage with people, create an environment where people are free to be themselves, and more importantly, open to receive the truth of Jesus. And if you're interested in joining this team and becoming part of what God is doing through Timberlake Online, please let me know on your connection card. Links can be found in chat, and I'll see you here next week at online.timberlakechurch.com.